Welcome to the Tilted Halo. This is a new podcast, and it's for anybody who's a woman in ministry. You might be a pastor like myself, a bishop, a priest, a rabbi, music minister, elder, children's minister, whatever your title is. You're absolutely in the right place, especially if you're someone who loves your ministry and you're doing it well and you're feeling pressure to sometimes be perfect, and deep down inside, you know you're not. And how in the world to deal with that? And men, you're absolutely welcome here too, because this is about ministry and the same thing can happen to you. So you're all in the right place. Let's get started with the show. There are times in life where we as human beings have to make some hard choices. And when it comes to certain topics and it's social and issues and things like that, that is part of it, including the issue that's very much on the minds of many these days is the issue of abortion. I don't know of any faith community where everybody agrees on which side of the issue you're on when it comes to abortion, because there are so many different facets to that. Yes, God created life and we are to honor life, and do not kill. It's a commandment. But the whole issue of when does life start, we haven't really decided that. And because of modern medicine, these days, a developing child in womb can survive much earlier if there's a birth than in any previous generation, in any previous time. And so that makes that question all the more difficult. And yes, there's a heartbeat. Yes, there's the feelings of pain and discomfort, but that happens to any creature where there's nerves involved, and any part of us where there are nerves involved. We feel pain. And so a developing fetus will feel pain at certain times. And so it's always such a hard question. When I was in my first parish, there was an opportunity to be part of something called a cancer residency for clergy. And the person who was teaching this is a genetics professor at a university near where I was. And we had a lot of discussions about cancer, yes, but at one point, someone in the class asked him about the question of abortion. And his answer for that was, to me, the wisest one I've ever heard. And that is that there's no easy answer to that question. You force somebody to bear a child because you say you can't have an abortion. Well, what are you doing to that mother? However that child came into being, if it was a violent situation through rape or incest, the thoughts of that mother having to bear that child for the person who did that to her can be very, very difficult. And how those feelings then get transferred to the child even before birth, there can be many ramifications that we don't even begin to think about as to what happens and how that plays out in that child's life. Have the child be born and give it up for adoption. That's not easy. Anyone who has gone through that process of bearing a child and then giving that child up, that's a part of you. How can you then just say, oh, I'm going to give this up? That's Yes, there are many people who are looking to adopt children. Wonderful. And that child, for whatever reason, may have a beautiful, wonderful home. But that child's still going to wonder, well, what happened with my birth mother? Why wasn't I wanted? Why was I given up? And so often, there are circumstances that I know of where a child who's adopted and the birth mother and the adoptive parents get together and form a beautiful, wonderful relationship. That's absolutely awesome when that happens. There are many other times where that does not happen. And a child goes through life wondering, who was this person? Who was my mother? Who was my father? How did I get to be? What is the biology and the genetics and the history that's there? Who really am I? Because I do not have the connection with these biological parents. So we're leaving a child with a lot of unanswered questions when they're given up for adoption. And there's a lot of questions for the parent, especially the mother, and sometimes also for the father, where a child's given up for adoption. It's like, what has become of my child? Is this child in a loving home? Will this child ever seek me out? Do I want to be known by this child? Do I want the child to know what happened and why? So that's not easy. And then there's the whole situation of somebody does choose to have an abortion. I've talked with at least one woman who has done that. I do not like abortion, especially not for an idea of birth control. That's not an appropriate method of birth control. But there are situations where that tough choice becomes a matter of the mother's health and well-being versus the birth of a child. Can we honestly say that that unborn child is more valuable than a mother? If we're making somebody face that decision, this could still be a death. And it may be a woman who already has children, who has a life, who has responsibilities, who has things she's contributing into this world. And isn't that also then a form of murder? If you see abortion as murder, forcing a woman to go through and face her own death in order to have a child born, that can also be a form of murder. So none of this makes it easy. What our responsibility is in the midst of this, as I see this, is to love the mother, the woman who is carrying this child, to love her enough to help her think through things as clearly as possible, and to make a decision that she believes is right for her. Like I said, I'm not in favor of abortion for the sake of abortion, but I am saying that we need to allow women to be able to choose, to be able to face these questions and wrestle with them and have all of the available options. Not because any of them is better than the other, because I'm not sure any one of them is better than the other when it comes to a tough choice like this. But what is best is to be there, to be loving, to be listening, to be helping the mother ask the tough questions, to walk with her while she struggles with the answers, to help her see all of the different ramifications for whatever choice she was looking at making. It's not going to be an easy choice. And then to walk with her after she's made that choice. To let her know that God loves her, that if at some point she believes that the choice she has made is wrong, she can ask for forgiveness and know that God will forgive. To help her if she chooses to bear a child and raise this as a single mother, perhaps, to help her with that. Don't just say, you got to bear this child and, now you're out on your own. If we're going to require that women bear a child after whatever happens that might cause her to think about an abortion, we need to be there as individuals, as faith leaders, and as a society to help her raise that child. And if the child has medical conditions, which sometimes is the reason for thinking about an abortion, severe medical conditions, we need to be there and not just say, oh, well, that's just the way it is. Now it's your problem. Go on and, raise this kid. Try to find the way to do that all on your own or with the added expenses in a family. I thoroughly admire and honor any woman who has had to face the tough choice of knowing that a child forming in her has some serious medical conditions and makes the choice, either way, to terminate that pregnancy or to go ahead and bear that child. And then to care for that child for the rest of that child's life, however short or long that might be. I know of a family where that happened. And they made the choice to have the child. And that child lived into teenage years. And there were the expenses and the trials and the traumas and the ups and downs with that child were many. Thankfully, they had a way to get the resources to help them through that. But that's not always true. What do we do then? Is it just the parent's responsibility? Tough choice, tough luck, That's not a loving and caring answer. And my concern is when people are faced with these kinds of tough choices, is what's the most loving thing for us to do? Yeah, we can go by the book and say, black and white. God says, do not kill. Yeah. But what are we killing if we require the birth of a child? That's a tough question, too. What are we killing in the spirit of a mother? What are we killing in a child that's being forced to be born and brought into a home where maybe that child's not wanted or where there aren't the resources to care for that child? There's more to life than just breath and, being in a heartbeat and walking and talking around. There's more to life than that. And so we need to think about the whole of life, of the mother, father, and other siblings who might be there, and of the child who is conceived and growing. And how do we help them? How do we honor and walk with people in those tough choices? Yeah. It's easier to make a rule and to therefore wash our hands of it. But we can't wash our hands of people. And we can't wash our hands of God's call to love us and for us to love one another as we want to be loved by God and by others. So I challenge you this time too. What is it that you can do to show God's love? Not God's judgment, but God's love when confronted with the issues of abortion. What does that look like to you? What does it look like to those on the other end who are facing that issue? It's a tough choice. I acknowledge that. But it's a choice where love needs to be tough too. So until next time, God's peace, God's blessings to each and every one of you, and go forth in love and God's love. You have been listening to Tilted Halo with me, Kathleen Panning. What did you think about this episode? I'd really like to hear from you. Leave me some comments. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode. And catch another upcoming episode for more conversation on ministry, life, mindset, and a whole lot more. Go to www.tiltedhalohelp.com, where I've got a resource guide and other resources waiting for you. And be sure to say hi to me, Kathleen Panning, on LinkedIn. See you on the next episode.